It's hilarious because he's drifting off while his wife is haranguing him over cheating on her, and he says, and he like leans back and gives this like smirk. It's really funny.
It is. It's a funny scene.
And then we cut to this thing where she approves of him completely, all of his activities,
right,
and all these women,
and then of course when we go back to the villa in his kind of fantasy where he has his harem of all of the women that he's kind of obsessed over the years. We even have like women that like a flight attendant from a flight to Copenhagen
right,
one time,
right,
or just like you get the impression that this place is populated not just with people who are deeply loved by him or meaningful to him in his history, but also women that he's just had a sort of totally momentary encounter with, but is never forgotten, and it's sort of stored up in his subconscious. Anyway, we're at that villa again. It's this childhood home where he's
being fawned over, and he takes a bath in the same vat. It's like a wine bath, and then they dry him off, and they put him in the white. They carry him in the white sheet like they did when he was a child.
Sabes, Guido, questo è per la manina tu moi?
Ah sì?
Wienka sambela sibili.
Siete contente, ragazze? Non è quello che avete sempre desiderato?
Certamente. E niente mica niente più bello in te mondo. Nadina, fa presto sta Cipria. Sta smorfiosa.
Nadine, cos'è che dicevi a Copenaghen?
Siamo deliziati di chiedere ai passeggeri di questo volo di trascorrere la notte a Copenaghen per un fortunato.
Sentite che voce, ragazze, sentite.
Tutte le spese saranno pagate dalla compagnia. A tutti felice notte.
And they're all fawning over him, and but then it becomes this horrifying thing where we find out there's an upstairs region where women who get too old, as in like apparently like 26 or something, at least in one woman's case, get sent, and they have to bask in their happy memories of being with him,
right?
And one of the women doesn't want to go up, and they all rebel, so he has to bring out the whip, and it's just this insane sequence that's
like visually striking. In addition to everything else, you get some of the most kind of like iconic images of him in his fedora with like this toga wrapped around him and this whip. It's like very funny and very interesting, but also very pathetic, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
It is that you it's pathetic. This man is behaving like a child, and he's also totally selfish. He's totally narcissistic, and he's married. And that's the thing, is that when you're married, you can't just let that wither on the vine and then expect that the rest of your life is going to stay manageable. I don't know that Fellini actually recognizes this insight, but it seems clear to me watching this that so long as he is unable to love his wife and be faithful to his wife, he's going to be thwarted as an artist. And one of the things that keeps coming up throughout the film is you can't make a love story, right? And in fact, even in this climactic sort of encounter with Claudia, with this ideal woman, one of the lines, this refrain that she keeps saying is that you don't know how to love, right? And so I think that perhaps like that Fellini recognizes this connection. But yeah, it seems to me that when you're married, your destinies become one. Like you are now one with this person. You where they end up is where you end up, and it's, they're another I, and that you can't just neglect this other I. There's that betrays a disintegration within yourself that is going to be thwarting you, right?
Yeah, and I think this scene with the women and the second scene with the fantasy scene with the women in the villa, really gets to the heart of this chaos that's at the center of Guido's life and is possibly the reason he can't create a coherent story, right? If you think about how artists sort of have to be actively receptive to beauty, right? He's sort of missing this, this depth where he could be actively receptive and then make something coherent out of that. There's a lack of integrity. There's a disintegration, right?
That's right. Because he has this intuition that there's a woman who will save him, right? And he thinks it's this ideal woman, right? But actually, the woman who saves him, he already has, And I think that the audience gets that Louisa really is this woman for him. I think that this line that you mentioned, Katie, at the end of that second villa sequence, where he says, I had prepared this speech for them.
I have the quote.
Yeah, go ahead.
Happiness consists in being able to speak the truth without making anyone suffer.
Yeah. Happiness consists in being able to speak the truth without making anyone suffer. And I think that this can only be spoken by someone with a deficient notion of the truth.
Right. What truth? I think he means his truth. I think he means his feelings. I think he means being honest.
Right, exactly. And so it's this sort of aborted notion of vulnerability, which is that I just bear everything. It's funny. This is something that's come up in our conversations before on this podcast about the virtue of leaving some things unspoken. Yeah. But it's almost as if, like, for him to be really truthful, he needs to tell his wife that he wants to be with other women, right? And that's something that she needs to accept. But this is not truthful.
In terms of his, the possible healing that could still take place after the conclusion of this movie in terms of his relationships, part of what makes a narrative, part of what makes the moral weight of a narrative is who gets to speak and when, right? And so I think it's really significant that at two of the climactic scenes, two of the female characters, Louisa and Claudia, both get to tell him, here's essentially what's wrong with you. I'm going to quote Louisa at length, if that's okay, because her speech is just so good. She's so mad after the audition, she storms out, and he comes out and tells her, this is just how I need to tell it. It's not a big deal. If only you didn't take everything so seriously, essentially, right? And she says to him, another fiction, another lie. You put us all in, but the way it suits you. Only I know the truth. You're lucky I'd never have the nerve to make it public the way you do. So again, speaking to this, to this need for integrity to keep some things private, right? To have a distinction between the public and the private, right? What can you have to say when you can't tell the truth to the one closest to you, the woman who's grown old at your side? He has no response to her. He has no answer. He just says, Louisa, cut the melodrama. And she tells him to go to hell. And then the very next scene is Claudia. They're driving together. He's sort of outlining his artistic vision to her. This is the ideal movie. This is the perfect movie. And you're the perfect woman. He's saying all these things. He's wooing her. He's flirting with her. It's, kind of tender, but mostly terribly sad, right? Because he's just had this fight with Louisa. And so he's literally trying to escape from that with her, and Claudia stands her ground. She says, no, that's that doesn't seem real. A guy like that isn't sympathetic. It's his fault. What does he expect from people? And Guido tells her, you're a pain like the others, and she kind of makes fun of him. And he says, well, it's because, they're talking hypothetically about the character, but we all know it's Guido, right? The character in the film. He says, because he no longer believes in the story. And she says, no, it's because he no longer knows how to love. He says, because it's not true that a woman can change a man. She says, because he doesn't know how to love. And because I don't feel like telling another pile of lies. He's getting closer and closer to the truth as he goes down this list, right? But she's already there, the core of all this is he doesn't know how to love. He asks her forgiveness then. He says, please forgive me. And she says, you're such a phony. I just love that. Wow. And they really do get the final word about him. It goes straight from there to the scene, where he's getting, again, peppered with little questions. Don't you take yourself too seriously? Are you for or against divorce? Interesting. Are you afraid of the atomic bomb? Do you believe in God? Is pornography art or entertainment? Why don't you make a film about love? And by now we know he can't do that. He either can't do that, or this is the total extent to which he can. And in either case, it's it's an indictment of right. So he's accepting all these judgments that have been made about him. There's nothing that he's trying to make excuses about or block anymore. He's giving it all an audience. He's giving it all an airing. He's lost. He has nothing to say. Can you honestly admit he has nothing to say? Why do you think your life interests others? If this film flops, what will you live on? Can you just admit that you can't communicate? And even Louisa is standing there in that final scene. She has on Claudia's veil now, but it's her bridal veil. And she's telling him, you'll never be what you once were. When will you truly marry me? Right. That speaks to what we get at the very end. We can ask maybe whether he really does truly marry her at the end. I think maybe that's a little bit unresolved, and maybe, Thomas, that's a source of what you're still not quite sure about at the end, because it is ambiguous. I agree with you. Yeah.